And this is called the Lie King. And it's about a time in Ireland when Ireland was prospering. A time of the 5 kings, the 5 provinces, 1 king for every province. And Ireland was doing very, very well indeed. And they were doing very well because every month on the hill of Tara, the High King, the one that ruled over the other 4 kings, he would be there, and people would gather before him, and they would do storytelling. Now, that High King, he loved storytelling. He wrote stories. Every other day he had a new story, and it was great fun every month. But that went on for so long. And one day the High King brought the other 4 kings in front of him and says, right, he says, we're going to ban storytelling. He says, what are you talking about? We're going to ban storytelling. You can't do that. We're Irish. You can't do that. I can do what I like, says the High King. Now, I want storytelling banned. But why? Why, says the King of Leinster. I'll tell you why, said the High King. I've heard every story here 100 times. There's nothing new. I know all the punchlines. I've written them myself. Now, I'm fed up with it all. Now, you go on and tell all the people in Ireland that anyone caught doing storytelling will have their tongue cut out. Well, I can tell you, been brought up in Roscommon, and that's some threat, all right. Well, the proclamation went around. Anyone telling stories would have their tongue cut out. Well, work went down. No one wanted to work. How can you work if you can't tell a story? And after 6 months, the old corn coffers were down to about 100 barrels. And after 8 months, we're getting lower and lower. And the 4 kings got together. Look, this is, we've got to do something about this. We're going to starve. We better go and see the High King. And off they went. And there's this High King, look, you got to bring back the storyteller. Why is that, says the High King. Tell you why, says the King of Munster. We'll starve. We've only got about 3 weeks more left in the grain stores. Now, the High King, he was very, very portly. He wasn't married and he had a big belly on him. That's not the reason he had a big belly on him, but he loved his food. And the mention of food running out, that was enough for him. Right, he said, look, he said, I might have been a little bit hasty there. Now bring back the storyteller and tell him come back again next Friday night. It's not that easy, says the King of Ulster. Why is that, says the High King? You hurt their feelings. You know, the island, they've got a very passionate people. And you try to stop them doing something to do best. You got to have some incentive if you want to get them back. But of course, the High King wasn't married. He didn't have this beautiful daughter you hear in these fairy stories to marry off. But he looked around him and he said, oh, kings, I tell you what, he said. I will give half of my kingdom to the first person that comes to me with a story that's so outrageous, so full of lies, and so elaborate, that I even say, that's a lie, it never happened. Well, says the King of Ulster, that sounds great. And the proclamation went all over Ireland. Get your stories, get up to the hill of Tara. Tell the king a good story that he will say it's a lie, never happened, and you will have half his kingdom. Well, they came and they went. They told stories, but they didn't last very long. And it was about 18 months later, and the High King thinking, well, you know, there's still nothing new. I'm still hearing the old stuff around the old days myself. Until one afternoon, there was a knock on his door. Now, kings in those days didn't live in palaces or castles. They had a big round house over there in Tara. And of course, the king had no servants. He had to open the door himself. And he went to the door. He says, who are you and what do you want? I'm Connor, he says, and I want half your kingdom. We'll see about that, says the High King. Come in. And he sat him down in the middle of his round house on a very round table. And he gave him 2 bottles of meat to drink. And when he finished the meat, he said, right, come on, Connor, come on here, I'll show you something. And he went outside. Now, do you see that, says the High King? Over there, you see. I've got 26 beehives. Have you ever seen so many beehives in all your life? Says Connor, that's nothing. My mammy, she got 365 beehives, one for every day of the year. And every beehive has got 48,612 bees. And it's my job every night to count them home, and every morning to count them out. And I can tell you, 365 times 48,612 is a lot. It's 70,743,380. And one evening, when I counted them in, there was one big short. There was only 70,743,379. Well, I couldn't go to sleep. I couldn't sleep easy that night in my bed. It was a bee missing. So I got my speed and I brought him up to the highest point, and I scanned the valleys below, and I saw the bee. And I rode down, and the poor bee was so laden with honey, he couldn't get off the ground. So I went back home, and I got 9 wicker baskets. And I brought them down and tied them around the horse, and I started to shovel the honey into the wicker baskets. And I only had 9 wicker baskets filled when the horse's legs began to buckle. Well, I went to the hedge and I drew a long hazel stick out, and I shoved it right up his jacksie. Right, so, you know, just to reinforce his rib cage, you see. Ha 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 ha, says the High King. Oh, that's not impossible, that could have happened. And he sent him off with a sting in his ear. And that evening, the High King, he sat in front of his big open fire and thought, do you know that? He nearly had me. I nearly was going to say that's a lie, it never happened. And he was in great form because that was a great story. And he began to think to himself, well, we should let him carry on with that story. I'd like to know the end of it. And so would I, telling it to you. I'd love to know what the end of that story was. But that's the way it was. The High King was happy. And he was very happy until a month later, another knock came to the door. And he got up and he opened. He said, who are you? What brought you here? My name is Finn, he says. And what brought me here won't take me to my grave. Oh, you're a smart one, all right, says the High King. Come in. They brought him in. And after 7 bottles of mead, he said, Finn, now come out here. And Finn went out. You see that over there, he says, to the High King. See that cherry tree? Every year, I've got cherries as big as hurling balls on there. Have you ever seen anything like it in your life? Ah, says Finn, that's nothing. That's only a twig, a little sapling. My mammy has a cherry tree, and it goes all the way into heaven. And every Sunday I climb that tree to have mass, because the council haven't come around to fill the potholes down, and I'm not walking all the way to mass down here. And one Sunday I was up there at mass, and what happened? A big storm came, and it blew the cherry tree down. Well, there was me stuck in heaven, and me mammy down below screaming for me that me bacon and cabbage was ready for me Sunday dinner. And she says, hurry up, it's getting cold. Well, how was I supposed to get back to me mammy? But I looked around and I saw some straw, and I started to weave a lovely rope with 4 plaits, and I let it down. And when me mammy pulled at the other end of it, I tied mine into the pearly gates. And I says, now, St. Peter, don't let anyone in here, Satan or sinner, till I get home to me bacon and cabbage. And I started off for home, fist under hand, hand under fist, and down I went. And I wasn't far from me mammy when what happened? The rope broke. Well, I went flying one way, and me mammy went the other way. And I was heading for the river, and I can't swim. And I started to shout, mammy, mammy, mammy. And there I went. Well, she come out, and she stretched her apron so hard, I bounced in and back up into the air. 6 somersaults on a pike, and back down I went, straight into the river. And I could see me life going in front of my eyes. But when I opened my eyes, I was at the bottom of the riverbed. And what do you think was going by? Only a big salmon. Well, I grabbed it around the neck, and I held on to it till it brought me up onto the shore. And I got out on dry land again. My mammy was standing at the door. And I looked at the salmon, and I looked at her and says, Mammy, let's have some salmon for a change. I'm fed up with baking cabbage every Sunday. Well, she brought out her sword, and she cut the head of the salmon. And then she cut that salmon from the neck right down to the belly. And what do you think popped out of the belly? A notebook. And I read this notebook, and in capital letters there it says, you work for my father for 2 pennies a fortnight, shaving gooseberries. And one afternoon, when my father was out looking for more gooseberries for your father to shave, your father went indoors and compromised my mother. Now, that means I'm the oldest son and this land belongs to me. That's a lie, says the king. It never happened. Well, Finn, he had got half the kingdom, and he was well pleased with himself. And every night, himself and the king, They tell each other stories, so outrageous, so full of lies, so elaborate. And they loved it. And sometimes, after maybe 8 or 9 bottles of mead, Finn might fall asleep in his chair opposite the High King. And the High King would stroke his big long white beard and he'd shake his head and he'd think to himself, how did I ever let him get the better of me? How did I lose half my kingdom to him? Because Finn was still only 6 years old. Thank you very much.